Today I have a mobile PC barcode scanner to take apart. These are used for managing inventory in warehouses or distribution centers, and they are made to be extremely durable and reliable. This one in particular features a single-core 806 MHz X-Scale processor with 256 megabytes of RAM and 1 GB of program memory. For software, this runs Windows CE 6.0, which is a highly optimized, built from the ground up RTOS for 32-bit RISC-based embedded systems. On the front here, we have a 3.7-inch color touchscreen display. It is 640 by 480 pixels. On the bottom we have a physical keypad. We have nice tactile buttons. We got numbers, letters, and buttons for moving the cursor around. On the top here is the glass window for the actual barcode reader. We also have a trigger here. This is to activate the scan function. Here we have the bottom of the handle. It has some aluminum in here for some reason. On the bottom here we have some contacts. This is for interfacing with the charger. Here's what we have on the tag. This device was made by Symbol Technologies, which operated under Motorola before being acquired by Zebra Technologies in 2014. This one is model MC9190 and it was made in December of 2014. You can also see all the possible impact points are covered with these big rubber pieces here to prevent damage. Another interesting detail is that we have a proprietary 2.5mm headset jack on the top. This unit also has a removable battery which can be taken out and charged separately. To remove it, we have to press down these two tabs on both sides, and then we can pull it out. It reveals a third tab here. You got to press that down and it comes out. On the bottom we also have some more of these little rubber strips to prevent impact damage. We also have some kind of identification code here that was added for tracking. The label here says this is compatible with MC90 series. This is a 91 series, so this is not the correct battery. It does have an older date code on it too, 25th of May 2012. Here's what we have inside. You can see we have two 18650 lithium-ion batteries. It looks like we have some more stuff on the inside here, so let's take a look. So underneath these pieces of tape here, we have the solder points going to the main contacts. I'm not sure how visible it is on camera, but on the ribbon wire here, we have a little label that says Gemini on it, so that's probably the code name or something. We also have a revision 6.0 label, and it says September 1st, 07. So the design of this ribbon cable is significantly older than the battery itself. Underneath the tape here, you can see we have a little PCB. It looks like we have a power regulator here, and here. And this little chip here is probably a charging controller. This big resistor looking part here is called a thermistor. It changes resistance with change in temperature, and that is so the charge controller here can determine the temperature of the battery and shut down the charging process if it exceeds a certain temperature. Here's what the back side of the ribbon wire looks like. This is the side that connected to the scanner, and this is the side that connected to the base. You can see a lot of these wires are just pass-through. This is so the scanner can communicate with its charging base. A lot of the connections on this side here go to these little pass-throughs here that go to the charging board here. This device was designed to be easily repairable, so parts like this keypad that get frequently worn out can be replaced easily. To take off the keypad, we first need to take out these two screws. We can then slide it back a few millimeters and then it comes off. This one is a non-OEM replacement part. This uses these large gold-plated contacts instead of a connector. And here we can see the pins it meets up with. Here we have a SD card holder. This is for expanding the storage. We also have this rubber ring around it to keep water out. We also have one around the main connector here. The next part to come off is this handle here. We have two screws up here, and we have two screws inside of here. This piece comes off just like the keypad. You have to slide it back a little bit and it comes up like this. We have some small little wires here to undo. Our first one here goes to this little speaker here, just plugs in. We have a wire here that goes to the trigger button that connects to the board here. And we also have this little short wire here that connects the headphone jack to the board. Just like the keypad, this one was a replacement part. It was manufactured on December 27th, 2017. This piece is made out of a very glossy kind of plastic. It doesn't say what kind of plastic it is anywhere on it though. Let's take off this little speaker here because I do happen to like speakers. Here's what the speaker looks like. You can see we have a vented pull piece here for that super awesome bass response. Here's what we have on the inside. These two pieces here are the Wi-Fi antennas. Both of the Wi-Fi antennas are connected to the circuit board with these little coax connectors here. They easily pop off. We also have another little connector here. This goes to what is presumably a CMOS battery. After the removal of those 4 screws, this piece comes off. And here's our little battery. Looks like it is a little double button cell battery. According to the label, this is a 2.4 volt nickel metal hydride battery. It has 15 milliamp hour capacity. The coax wires are nicely terminated to the ribbon wires. We also have these little conductive tape strips which connect the Wi-Fi ground to the metal chassis. The next thing to remove is this aluminum cover here, but first we have to disconnect this ribbon wire here that goes to the scan engine. Then this piece comes off very easily, and we don't have any thermal pads or anything. And it looks like I was mistaken. This is actually made out of magnesium, which is pretty cool. To remove the scan engine, we have to take out these 3 little screws here. Here's the scan engine. This is made out of a machined piece of aluminum. On the top we have some tape layers, and it looks like we have some copper between them, probably for shielding purposes. You can see there's a copper layer in there. Here's the information tag. This one is the Zebra SE1524 long range 1D scanner. Underneath the tape we have a SST flash memory chip. This one has 1 megabit of storage, and it is used to store the code the scan engine ASIC uses. We have this chip here, which is very important. This is the scan engine ASIC. Over here we have a tiny little precision op amp. After removing the sticker, I can see that this chip is made by ON Semiconductor. I can't find any information on this chip, which suggests this is a proprietary chip. To take off the board, I have to take out these screws and desolder this little board here that goes to the laser diode. Here's what's on the other side of the board. We have a whole bunch of test points. Over here we have this component, which is actually a small electromagnet. And here we have our photodiode. Let's take a look at the components of the optical section. Here we have our laser diode. We have a 45-degree mounted mirror here. We also have a parabolic mirror here. It is parabolic on both directions. That is so it focuses the beam. We have a hole in the middle to let the laser out. Here we have an oscillating mirror. It is mounted on this little shaft here, and we have these little stretchy rubber pieces that allow it to oscillate. We have a little neodymium magnet here, which interacts with the coils in this component here to create an oscillation. The photodiode sat in this little metal compartment here. You can see we have an opening to let light through. To get a better understanding of the optics, let's take a look at this drawing I created. Here's the path the laser takes before it leaves the scanner. It hits the 45-degree mirror and hits the oscillating mirror, which causes the straight beam to become a sweeping beam. It then goes on to hit the barcode. The black lines absorb the laser light, and the white lines reflect it back. The reflection hits the oscillating mirror again, and it hits the parabolic mirror. Since the parabolic mirror is not uniformly parabolic, it reflects the light upward to the photodiode. This picture shows the different parts of a barcode. There are actually several different extra pieces of necessary information encoded into it. Now let's take a look at the hardware design for the scanner. More specifically, the ASIC that controls it. With some research, I have put together a block diagram. The 4 middle blocks make up the main pipeline that does all the work. The analog front end receives data from the CCD sensor or the photodetector, and it is converted into raw binary data. Next, it goes through an image processing block. First, it sorts through the huge amount of binary image data to find data that looks like a barcode. It then applies corrections to just the section of the image of interest, which would otherwise cause issues with the decoder. The decoder interprets the refined image data by decoding the barcode. Then error detection algorithms are applied to make sure the barcode data makes sense. The host interface block creates and sends an information packet containing the barcode data string to the SoC. This chip also contains a microcontroller that does control-related tasks. The flash memory interface allows the ASIC to read and use the code stored in the flash chip. Back to the main assembly. To remove this board, I have to take out these 2 screws here and undo this connector here. Next, I will remove the cable going to the digitizer and the one going to the screen. Here's what the board looks like. It is nicely populated with components. I've also determined that this board is an 8-layer PCB with a thickness of 1.6 millimeters. You'll also notice all these little gold dots all over the circuit board. These are test points. You can see here we have these grounding contacts that made contact with the magnesium plate that sat on top. We have 2 connectors here that aren't used for anything. Over here we have the Wi-Fi module. This one is made by Simple Technologies. We have some underfill since this module is connected on like a BGA. Here's a close-up of what's underneath the EMI shielding. We have multiple chips, including ones under resin. The 2 RF antenna connections go to the small RF front-end chip. The front-end chip connect to the Connexent CX50222 RF transceiver chip, which unfortunately has no datasheet. While researching for this video, I found some interesting documentation about this Wi-Fi module on the FCCID website. This document shows the dies and the gold bonding wires underneath the epoxy blobs. The first die is a flash memory die. You can tell because most of the die area is continuous memory blocks. Underneath the flash memory die we have some sort of plastic or foam spacer. Beneath the spacer is the broadband SoC. To the left we have another die. On closer inspection it contains digital logic. There's a lot of possibilities of what this die might be for, and it's just about impossible to know for sure. Here's a block diagram for the Wi-Fi module. The leftmost blocks do all the digital networking and processing before the data heads to the RF section. The RF transceiver takes in the broadband data and synthesizes a radio signal, or vice versa depending on whether it's transmitting or receiving. The final step is the analog front end. It does the final steps of conditioning the RF signal, both when it is receiving and transmitting. This chip here is a Broadcom Bluetooth chip. You can see it's paired with its own little crystal oscillator. It's surrounded by this gold plating to provide RF isolation. The only thing that passes through it is the antenna trace, which goes to this RF filter here. Moving on, our next chip is this chip here. This is a Maxim power management chip, which is important for battery life. Our first chip on the other side is this chip here. This is an audio codec made by Wolfson. It is in charge of the speaker, the headphone jack, and the microphone. We also have the connectors for the headphone jack and the microphone mounted close by. Beneath it we have an Atmega 16A 8-bit MCU. Due to its close proximity to the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth modules, I'm guessing it's for managing wireless communications. This middle section here contains the most important chips of this device. This big chip is the Marvel SoC, or System on a Chip. It contains the CPU, GPU, and much more. This chip here is the main memory chip, custom made by Toshiba. This chip contains 2 individual dies, one for the 1 GB of flash memory, and one for the 256 MB of RAM. The flash stores the OS and the installed programs, and the RAM is the short-term working memory for the SoC. When the layout of this board was created, it was anticipated that a separate RAM chip would be necessary. That's why we have this extra spot here. This chip here is a Xilinx CPLD, or Complex Programmable Logic Device. It contains 256 logic cells, and in this case it's used for glue logic. All three of these chips have underfill, which generally helps with reliability. Here we have another MC9190G 8-bit MCU. This one manages the keyboard and the accessories like the charging base that are connected through the USB and RS-232 data lines that pass through the battery. Above it we have a dedicated RS-232 transceiver, since the MC9190G does not have one built in. Our final chip is this power regulator IC, which is used to provide clean and stable 5 volts and 3.3 volts to the rest of the board. Back to the main assembly, we have another piece of magnesium. Here we have what's underneath. You can see here is the display itself. I believe this one comes out like this. We have another little board on the back. I think this is just some kind of basic adapter. This is confirmed by the label on the silk screen. It doesn't look like we have anything on this board besides a few resistors. This piece also comes out. It looks like it is a gasket to keep dust from getting underneath the screen. This plastic piece here can come off, so let's see if we can get this off and take a look at the ribbon wire underneath. To remove the ribbon wire assembly, I have to take out these 2 screws here. We also have 2 more here. Here it is removed. This whole thing has adhesive on the back of it, and that's what was holding it on. We have a large rubber gasket around the connector that goes to the battery. There are so many signals that need to be transferred through here. This is actually a double layer. You can see we have a set of traces on the back side, and we have a different set of traces on the top side. All that we have left is this plastic case. Next, we can further explore the architecture of the main SoC. The most important part is of course the CPU core, which is paired with 256 kilobytes of level 2 cache. Xscale actually has a pretty interesting history. It is an architecture made by Intel for the handheld market. They were only partially successful though, and sold all assets to Marvel. We also have a 2D graphics accelerator. It is vastly simpler than a traditional GPU, and it has a very simple architecture. The MMX2 unit works alongside the 2D graphics accelerator to construct frames. The 768 kilobytes of SRAM is used as a frame buffer. We also have 32 kilobytes of boot ROM, which is used on the power on sequence. The SoC contains a main memory switch, which allows the CPU to quickly access any of the memory spaces to improve performance. This SoC has 4 internal buses. We have 2 high-speed system buses and 2 low-speed peripheral buses. They are connected together with a bus bridge and a direct memory access controller. Here's a die shot of the PXA320 I've created. The first thing that's immediately apparent is the large memory blocks. Each one is 256 kilobytes for a total of 768 kilobytes of SRAM. To the left of the SRAM, we have 2 phase-locked loops, which are circuits that create clock signals. We also have 2 DMA controllers. The middle section of this chip is just a massive amount of digital logic that has been space optimized. The last section is the important one. All of these items in this section share the same high-speed data bus, labeled as System Bus 2 on the block diagram. This section shares a common phase-locked loop that is clocked at the speed of the CPU. There is also another DMA controller nearby. This block is the Xscale core. It has 32 kilobytes of instruction cache and 32 kilobytes of data cache. In the middle we have instruction cache and data cache tags. Left of the CPU is the MMX2 unit. To the lower right of the CPU we have boot ROM. There are 8 4 kilobyte blocks for a total of 32 kilobytes of boot ROM. The final large memory structure is the L2 cache block, which contains 256 kilobytes of memory. The L2 cache tags are right above it. The functions of this final section were not immediately clear to me. It turns out there are several things all packed together. Somewhere in this area is the 2D graphics accelerator. It actually does not take up that much silicon area because it's highly specialized. Other components in this area include the memory switch and the high-speed memory bus. There are also other components in this area that are not shown in the block diagram, such as power and performance monitoring hardware for the CPU core. So that's all for today, and thanks for watching.